This week, Andrew and Matt are joined by Liz Smith, accredited counselor, psychotherapist, and qualified counseling supervisor. She runs Free to Be Me Neurodiversity, training other counselors and therapists in best neuro-inclusive practice. Liz is also a counseling tutor, involved in the provision of core counseling training at postgraduate level. This episode discussed the challenges of late diagnosis of ADHD that Liz faced, how it impacted and shaped her work, and how social media can serve as an unrealistic window into what others seem to be doing, and how that can affect all neurodivergent people, but especially small business owners who may feel their work is overshadowed by the noise.
Well, hello, finally, we are back with Talk ADHD. Sorry for the extended absence, but that's what happens when two professionals with busy jobs and practices focus on work. So we're glad to be back recording. Andrew, it's good to see you. And Liz, it's really good to see you. So we are joined, starting off with a fabulous guest. Liz Smith is here with us. And I think what we're about to have is a fascinating conversation with two clinical professionals and me about things that are affecting a lot of people. But let's start with this, Liz. Would you like to tell us who you are, what you do professionally, and how long for, so people know who we're talking to?
Okay, so yeah, my name is Liz and I am a psychotherapist. So I've been doing that for around, it's probably about 7 years now, which is quite scary. Time is a little bit of an elastic concept in my brain, but it probably is something like that. And I no longer do a huge amount of actual therapy, despite still being a therapist, but I'm also a clinical supervisor and I work part-time in an organisation where I do clinical assurance and some training and some other bits and pieces. What might be more accurate to say, what do I not do?
And all right, what don't you do?
What don't I do? Walk in a straight line, go around my own house without tripping over my own feet or bashing into a door frame.
Okay, fine. Which kind of neatly segues into the next question then. You are the kind of professional that Andrew and I love talking to because, to kind of phrase, you're one of us, right? You're in the tribe, so you're neurodivergent.
Oh, yes.
But
yes.
Would you like to tell us how, what, multiply, singularly, when did neurodiversity and neurodivergence become a thing that you thought, oh, wait a minute, this is me?
So I was diagnosed with dyspraxia when I was in my 20s after sort of a bit of a struggle at work. An occupational health professional suggested it, and that kind of made a lot of sense. And then a few years later, we had COVID lockdowns, and this was not a good time, and wondered why I was sort of struggling so much. Eventually, that sort of led to an ADHD diagnosis after kind of realising that I ticked a lot of those boxes, and that also led into an autism diagnosis after those traits were also identified, which I had sort of been thinking for quite a while, but I'd never really done anything about it because I just sort of felt like I didn't really need to. But then it did become a bit of a sort of, okay, I need to understand what this is about, sort of a thing.
Yeah, Andrew, there's that line that we talk about so often again, isn't it, though, from looking at ADHD particularly, and then after ADHD coming more awareness or more having to look at autism. You know, that's certainly been my journey as well. And I've been speaking to people this week at an NHS conference who have exactly the same journey. So it's fascinating to hear you say that as well. One question, if I can. You mentioned that lockdown, like so many people, was the point where you suddenly went, why? I think you said, why is this so hard? And why are things so hard? What was it about lockdown that led you to that? Because this is something we've heard so often. It's led to the explosion and in awareness and people talking about it. But why? What did you notice then that you hadn't before?
So I think all my coping mechanisms for ADHD were sort of taken away. I went to the gym a lot. I'd be lifting heavy weights, relied a lot on exercise, I think, to manage myself. And then suddenly I couldn't do that. Every day sort of was a bit Groundhog Day, trying to navigate, sort of suddenly lost all my work because I was self-employed therapist in a clinic. So a lot of that just sort of disappeared overnight. And I think probably working, having that routine, going out, being a certain place at a certain time. And of course, when you're a therapist, like, you cannot be late. So I think it really gave me structure, and then just suddenly I didn't have any. And there was all this unpredictability as well, which, when's the lockdown going to end? What's that going to look like? What are the rules going to be? And that my autistic side just didn't love that either. So basically the entirety of my brain was just in a bit of freewheeling chaos, I think is probably the best way to put it.
Do you think because of your professional career, you thought about things differently or more deeply than perhaps somebody that isn't a psychotherapist would have? Do you think you were doing more, I don't know whether analysis is the right word, or were you able to come to things quicker? Or do you think it made it harder for you because you knew other stuff?
I mean, I was an overthinker way before I was a therapist. So, I think even without therapy training, we would have been overthinking pretty much everything anyway, because that's just a feature of how I am. And of course, I've learned since that, that's kind of a trait as well, particularly for ADHD. So I think it's likely that I would have done that introspection without being a therapist, but whether it would have led me to the same conclusions, I'm not sure. My client base was very accidentally neurodivergent even before the lockdowns. Like all of it had, for some reason, neurodivergent clients kind of gravitated and stayed. So there was already a little bit of a running theme there. And I'd had somebody sort of assume that I was quite early on when I started working post-qualifying. I was kind of like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what you're seeing. So it was sort of already.
Did they tell you what they were seeing out of interest, or was it just an offhand, are you?
Well, it's an interesting thing because as a therapist, you can't really sort of explore that too much because you're there for the client.
It was a client that said that? Oh, I thought it was another. Oh, okay. Yeah, probably not.
Yeah.
I'll hijack this.
I spent years sitting in clinic diagnosing people with ADHD who were saying, you seem to really understand this, you get this. Have you not got ADHD? And I would say, no, I haven't. My school reports were all right. That was my stock line for many, many years, and many, probably hundreds of people sat in front of me, and they would all say, you really seem to connect with this, you get this. Did you find that maybe there's something there that just that because you're one of us, that there was that connection? Because I know people now sort of that I see now feel that there's something different because I am one of us.
Absolutely, and I think it's becoming, well, maybe not the norm in therapy, but I think it's becoming more accepted that clients will ask, can they see a neurodivergent therapist, or maybe asking their therapist if they are neurodivergent because it feels important.
Do you think it makes a difference?
Yeah. It does. It absolutely does.
So I'm going to come back to why I say how in a minute. I'll come back to a question in a minute, but how does it make a difference for you?
There's just things you don't have to explain when you're a therapist and you kind of share a neurotype or half of a neurotype, or that you don't have to explain, say, your thought processes, the way you communicate. It's sort of just accepted. I think it's there's a sort of writer in our field, of course, called Eugene Gendlin. I remember learning about this concept when I was training. Somebody that my supervisor, who's an absolutely brilliant guy called Divine Chirura, and if he is listening, then he gets a high because he's one of the good ones. And he used to talk about the felt sense all the time, which is when you just know, you just sort of know that you feel comfortable with somebody, that there's a felt sense that somebody gets it.
It's fascinating that you both mentioned that, because literally last week, a former mentor and client of mine asked me that question. He said, Matt, how do I recommend someone finds a therapist that will work for them if they're neurodivergent? And my only answer was, ask them if they are, and if they're not, find one that is. And I based it simply on that, because you're probably going to have a better relationship because you'll know they get it, Angela, I just wanted to bring you in here. I was curious, Liz is one of many people who, in that COVID period, came to diagnosis. Did that period change the way people spoke about their challenges that they were coming to you with?
I think there was a shift in culture. I don't think necessarily people were sort of describing different things, but there was a difference in how people were talking about those things.
Right.
There's sort of an evolution of culture, but we all had time to, as Liz said, the routine went out the window. We all had to stop and look in the mirror, because that's all there was, cleaning the bloody mirror, wasn't it? There wasn't so much to do. We couldn't go out. So we were faced with ourselves. We were faced with these questions that we could go to the gym day in, day out and go to work and do X, Y, Z and keep busy and not think about it and not stop and live on stress. And then all of a sudden, don't go to work, stop. And I think that's hard for anyone to, that was hard for all of us as a society to face that, but for some more than others.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because so many people were seeking assessment during that period. And it's the first time hearing you talk, Release, and I've just thought, I wonder if the conversations were different than, before or even since, and I think this is where this conversation is going to go, is the since this evening, about how is this thing called neurodivergence being spoken about, particularly sort of following on from our conversation, Andrew, with Ina Konevsky about social media and what she does. Liz, as a professional, as somebody who works and exists in this field, you, like Andrew and I and everyone else, at some point has used social media, whichever platform that may be, to try and reach people, find clients, etc. But that, again, this phrase, since COVID, I think there's been quite a shift in the way this is spoken about online, and I will sort of come back to that. I just wanted to, sort of by way of closing off your introduction, say, so you get your diagnoses in COVID. As a professional, as someone that overthinks professionally,
yeah.
How long did it take you? Yeah, right. How long did it take you to accept it? Do you think you have yet? Are you at that point of? Because I talk about the point where we can take a breath again and go, okay, I'm all right with all of this now, right? I have ADHD. I have autism. Have you got there now? Or are you still on the journey? Where are you, would you say?
I think the moment I realised that I had got there was starting a new job. So I run my business, Free to Be Me Neurodiversity, part of the time, which runs training on various aspects of neurodiversity, mainly for clinicians.
Yeah.
And I also work part-time somewhere else. And I think it was going into that job and just being absolutely dead up front about who I was, what you were getting, essentially, with me, which is like, okay, this is kind of how my brain works, and this is what will really work for me, and this is what will not. And just that experience of being able to be that frank and kind of think, okay, if they can't sort of, if that's not okay, then I don't want to be there.
Wow. That's a pretty pivotal thing to feel, though, isn't it? To be able to have that agency is a word we use a lot, to advocate for yourself with confidence and not apologize for yourself and any of the bits that people may find different. I think that's so huge. But yeah, there's one hell of a way to come to the acceptance then. I love that. That's just made me, sorry, you floored me with that statement, because I've never heard anyone say that so. I just went and did it because I spend my life trying to teach organisations how to meet the needs of people who aren't quite as confident. So it's, I think that's fantastic. Let's talk Free to Be Me then. When did you start that? What is it? What does it do? And then let's try and look at how that social media has played a part in that.
So Free to Be Me, we started in 2022, and originally we were offering counselling because myself and my business partner at the time we're both therapists, counsellors. That's what we wanted to do, was sort of neurodivergent counsellors for neurodivergent people. And we were sort of bobbing along quite well. And then we got a cost of living crisis, which really sort of hit the numbers, I guess, of people who could afford private therapy. We were sort of getting a lot more people who were wanting stuff for free and low cost, which is, I get it, absolutely get it in that climate, and there's nothing wrong with asking. It's just that we weren't able to do it. So it was a decision to focus on the training side of it, to be able to actually, skill up the clinicians essentially to work effectively with neurodivergent people. So that's what we focus on now, is things like supervision groups, training courses and workshops. So we do bits of things with online events as well as our own courses, and we do lots of stuff with organisations that employ counsellors and other mental health professionals mainly.
And I think I'm going to ask a really stupid question now. Is there quite a demand for that at the moment?
There's quite a bit. Yeah, turns out that quite a lot of people are cottoning on that there's maybe more of us around than they thought, and they might need to do a few things differently in order to work effectively with this client group. I think there was maybe a little bit of a resistance in therapy world to that at first, of like, well, we're trained in this way, you know, whether it's person-centered, whether you're psychodynamic, whether you do CBT, that, you know, it's sort of like you're trained in that way of working and that will work for everyone. But I think there's much more an acceptance now that maybe what you do does need to be adapted a bit more.
Right, makes sense. So, social media then. You have a business, you need to find clients, customers, call them what we will, as do I, as do Andrew. So, you know, I first connected with you on LinkedIn as a professional forum, should we say. First question, do you use other platforms as well?
Yeah, I do. So we've got a Facebook page, and I'm active in a few sort of CPD groups for therapists kind of things where we post training, and Twitter and LinkedIn. I think that's pretty much it.
Right. Now this, dear listeners, is where the conversation might sort of seem to take a 90-degree turn. These I wanted to talk to you, and Andrew and I said this would be really good because, if I'm reading it right, it was a month ago that you put a post out that really hit me and made me sit up and take notice. And then I know that Andrew, you sort of and I spoke about it. So I don't think you want to talk us through the genesis of this, but the first paragraph was the one that, I'll be honest, I skim read it and went, oh God, no, why? Right? Because you're one of the good ones. I've decided I'm no longer going to be active on this platform. I'll post via Free to Be University, but I won't regularly be using my own profile to post content or interact. Now, all I took from that before I read everything else was, I can understand why, but what was behind that for you?
I think the final straw was just sort of seeing somebody doing something effectively that I'd been doing. I was doing a good couple of years ago before this was sort of the popular thing to do, and kind of dressing it up as this big new innovative idea. I just kind of thought, actually seeing this, being exposed to this, it's not good for me. I'm not focusing on my own business. I'm not focusing on what I do. I'm starting to focus on what other people do and getting mad about that, instead of actually positively focusing on my own sphere that I can influence. So it was just kind of like, this is how it's got now. This is how this marketplace is. It's quite saturated.
I was going to just say that came, which Matt hasn't said, at a time that Matt and I were talking about this and the discomfort from some of the stuff we see on social media. So I think that's, you know, it hit me as well. I was quite shocked to see that. And it resonated around other conversations that Matt and I and other people were having at the time of what is going on here? What is this thing that is happening that's evolving? It was one thing when it was TikTok and it was an awareness raising about ADHD, but it's the culture seems to have evolved again.
It just feels like, I don't know if you're seeing it, that everybody is starting to sort of do this now, that people can have their diagnoses for a matter of weeks and suddenly they've got a business and they're consulting or coaching, and there's no kind of regulation around this. There's no, you don't necessarily know what people's qualifications are. And people can be brilliant at advocacy, at all kinds of things. You don't have to sort of have the degrees to do everything. It's not necessarily that. It's just like some of the things you can see that, maybe there's internalized ableism that's not been addressed, or that maybe somebody's not ready to be doing that quite yet, or to cope with what that brings your way when you're so in the public eye as well.
I think you're right. Interestingly, when we were talking about this, and Andrew will vouch for this, I spoke about RSD recently, and I still term it when I have an episode, it's like a flash. There's a magic trick called flash paper, which looks like tissue, and you put a light into it, and it goes. Well, that's my brain when something winds me up, right? There's no gradually just. And as Andrew says, we'd been seeing a lot of that, and then you post this. And I think what I, in my position, had started to get to is I could just as easily, Liz, be the person that you were just describing. Does that make sense? Because I'm not a clinician. I'm not a doctor. I haven't got a degree, right? I came out at the back of my diagnosis, which was just before COVID, but nonetheless, having spent 15 years while doing other things in advocacy for other people, then going, I need to do this. I want to make it. But I could look just like any other person that's got a late life diagnosis and gone, right now I connect with the likes of you. The people I think are brilliant, I will talk to, connect with, and I admire. Not everyone's got the capability or the experience to be brilliant, to be good, even to be adequate. And I think it's so easy to have a presence, right? It's so easy to have a good profile, a good website, a good anything. The bit that I think is causing the consternation that I think I'm hearing from both of you and I see from others is substance. And when it feels like there's substance missing, or even, dare I say, ethics missing, it starts to make me question, where are we? What's going on? Because I'm in this to help people, just like you are in what you do, to help people. That's what both of you do and everyone else is. But I see things that I think that's not helping anymore.
Yeah.
It could be worse than that. It could be counterproductive. And I think it's perhaps a little easier for me than Liz because I've got a prescription pad. Yeah, so I have this tangible thing that other people can't do. Other people think they can talk, and somehow that becomes a talking therapy. And there's a lot of training and a lot of thinking that goes behind even the structuring of a sentence in a talking therapy, the way that you say something. Never mind what you say, but the way you approach it, the time it takes to move to a position of being able to safely say something in a therapeutic relationship. And I'm seeing a lot of, it's the hacks, Matt, that we keep seeing. I want a hack that makes my life easier. I want a shortcut. Well, talking therapies are not a shortcut. And I don't think a diagnosis is a shortcut to sorting out your life. It's a part of the journey.
Yes.
But it's a very difficult journey that, yeah, you can have an inexperienced guide that maybe will help you. But lots of times I've worked with people who have had unhelpful guides that have taken them down the wrong, off into the depths of the woods and got lost. And for the person who's saying I'm helping, yes, they can say, oh, well, I'm just going to leave you in the woods now and someone else is going to come and find you. But actually that person is terrified.
Yeah, I think I like that analogy of being left in the woods, if I'm honest, because there's a lot of that when people reach their capability, their limits of what they actually can do and are forced to be honest about it. The person that came to them looking for help is then left high and dry, lost, going, well, that's not what was on the website. That's not what the posts seem to say. Interestingly, is Andrew talking about the structuring of sentences. I see a lot of adverts for online therapy now. It seems to be a boom industry. But again, I often wonder how much of this is just really slick marketing and how much of it is substance. For an independent, there's you and your business partner. For a small business, do you feel that, the reason behind the post and all of that is because it's harder to constantly hear and fight that noise, and it's potentially more damaging for you to do that than it is just to say, you know what, the people that need us will find us, and I'd rather that I focus on that and not the noise and the distraction?
I definitely think there's something in that, yeah. And, going back to what you said about, I could be one of those people. I think what I've always seen, how you speak about what you do, Matt, is the authenticity, the truthfulness, if you like, about, this is who I am and this is what I do. And you have never presented yourself as something that you're not, or promised something that you couldn't deliver. And that's, I really respect that. And it's really hard to do that in a sea of slick marketing, sound bites, very kind of stylized posts, lots of selfies, and it's difficult to do what you do. Maybe one day I'll pick your brains about how you manage it. But I think for me, it was, getting lost in the noise, I think, of, well, where do I even fit here? Somebody who's started to feel like I was just plodding, like I looked like a real plodder because I was here going, well, we've got qualifications, we've got the expertise, we've put all the time into this, but it's not shiny, it's not exciting, it's not promising the instant results. And, it's that RSD thing, isn't it? You start to feel like, oh, people don't like me. But actually, if I think about it, I've got loads of amazing colleagues, loads of absolutely brilliant people that, support us, that come to our courses, people I work with. Why am I even thinking about these people on LinkedIn? Why am I thinking about...
This is where I get to ask a therapist the question, and you've got to look at yourself and answer that a different way, right? But there's something really tangible in that. As an individual, not as a therapist, Liz, now, but as an individual with ADHD, right? And let's throw into that anxiety, because I know it's there, and so do you, right? And all of that, and RSD. Why can we not pay attention? Why do we get so drawn? And Andrew, I'm putting this to you as well. What is it about the nature of our neurology that sucks us into that kind of empty void of, here, look at all this and make yourself feel like crap? Why do we do that? And
Hi folks, it's Matt. Sorry to butt in, but I'll be really quick. It would really help us if you could take a minute to do a few things to help this podcast reach more people. Wherever you're listening, if you could like it, assuming that you do, if you could subscribe wherever you're choosing to listen to this or watch it, and if you could jump onto the YouTube link and leave a comment about the episode that you've just listened to, Andrew and I would really appreciate it, because that all really helps this podcast reach more people. For now, I'll stop waffling on and we'll get back to
therapist. Do you now look back, having done the steps away, and gone, why did it take me so long?
About lots of things.
I've certainly got stuff I can say about that. I think a lot of us don't like marketing. Yeah, I really struggle with it as someone who owns a business, and we don't do a lot of marketing. I believe that good work should speak for itself. I think back before my ADHD career, I used to talk to drug reps and say, well, your product sells itself. What have you even got a job for? Because the people I said that to, that it did. And I struggle with the concept of marketing and the idea of I have to make it flashy and appealing. But, Coke sell more cola than people who don't advertise, and then you've got all this tension of, do I want to sell this? Is this what's going on? So there's a lot going on in your relationship with having a business that helps people. It's not an easy or comfortable thing to do. I hate sending people invoices. If I don't, I'm not this. So I am uncomfortable when I send an invoice to someone. I don't like chasing up invoices. I try and avoid it. All of that stuff I really don't like. I just want to do a good job, help people find their way through what can be a difficult journey. And I don't look forward to the Christmas Coke advert or what John Lewis's advert's going to be this Christmas. That sort of stuff doesn't interest me, and I think probably we, as a group of people, are less likely to be fooled by that. But there's a lot of it goes on. It's all in the shop front, and there's no substance behind it. You go in, and the storeroom's riddled with rats.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter so long as everything looks glossy and shiny up front. Yeah, it's a challenge. But it's definitely a challenge we at Divergence face and are looking at the moment. Yes, word of mouth is doing great. We don't do a great deal more advertising than that. But if we're going to grow, it sticks in my mouth to say we have to. But what I don't want to be doing is these shorts of, hey, we can make your life better with just, that's not, there isn't a hack to this. There's support to do the hard work. So yeah, lots there.
Yeah.
Take the bones out of that.
Yeah, all right. I'll come back to that in a minute. Liz, what about you then on that point? What is it about you?
Well, I am a therapist, so I am going to get sort of, some Dr. Freud out of the box, like he hides under my table waiting to come out when there's an opportune moment. But, there is an element of childhood to this, I think. Well, certainly there is for me, I'll own that about, let's face it, us neurospicy people, we're not usually the popular kids in school, are we? So there is a sort of element of like that aspect of social media can make you feel like that again, that you are yet again sort of on the edge of an in crowd, or you're just not in it, when you sort of see these cliques online. And it doesn't just happen in neurodiversity world, it happens in, therapist groups, in, everywhere really. So there is a certain amount of like, that's triggering is a bit of a strong word, but it brings up your stuff, your baggage from your past, I guess, of exclusion, sort of social marginalisation, all of those lovely experiences that we often have during the school years and sometimes beyond for people.
See, the reason I'm sat here going, is because literally this morning. So I'm in recovery. I'm recovery from addiction. So I sort of have a recovery group that I'm part of. Yesterday, I spoke to a recovery counsellor, a guy called James Hanson, and I had a fantastic conversation with him. And literally, we were talking about the history of the word resentment and where it comes from and what it means. And what do I do this morning? I wake up, I see something on LinkedIn, and I was instantly that desperate to be popular, never quite cool enough, kid at school, feeling really, really bitter about the thing I saw, and it sucked me straight in at 6:30 this morning, and I had to get up, go and do a load of work on it myself, and go, no, put that in its box, Matt. So I think both of you are spot on here, Liz. I think you're right. The shiny, the slick, those that can make it look like, it's like you say, Andrew, the shop front looks brilliant, but riddle rats analogy, right? Those that do that well, or have people helping them do that, are always going to make those of us who aren't so comfortable doing that feel bad, feel less than, feel like, am I as successful? Am I as good? Am I as credible? Am I as XYZ? Right? So it's interesting. You can put that therapist view on it, and you can put your clinician hat on and say, I hate sending people invoices. All I want to do is help. But in making sure there's enough people to help, we've got to find people, right? We've got to be out there. Okay, so let's step this forward. We have to be out there. Would you agree with me and say that, and I think this has happened more in about the past 18 months, that there has been a tonal shift in the kind of marketing, the kind of content, both about ADHD support, or ADHD, and therapy for that matter. Everything I'm seeing about people talking about counselling and therapy. And when I say tonal, I think it comes back to what you said about hacks, Andrew. I see so much that I think, I don't actually think you've ever done that. I think you're stringing together sound bites of things you've seen, heard, read, and reposting it really well to seem like credible information. But I'm seeing what feels like an awful lot more of that than I am genuine, authentic. I use the term a lot, and it makes me sound like the grumpy 50-year-old I am, grown up information. And I think Ina said this as well. It's the difference between content and information. And I don't know if you're seeing that as well, that there is this shift, that the content's the important thing, the quality.
There's something about the connection. This is probably a wider social thing that as we are, as a society, more able to make our own content. I look at content online other than stuff related to ADHD, and more people are able to do what we're doing right now and put their views out there online. But the ones that get the clicks are the flashy ones. That's what people want. They don't want three people in their middle age talking through difficulties of navigating life as someone with a neurodivergence out there in the public arena, because it isn't easy. But people don't want that. They want that fast pace. And I scroll past things, and go for that's got a bright shiny gimmick on, not just in the ADHD world, but if I'm doom scrolling, the stuff that grabs my attention is the slick, well produced stuff. It's not things like this. I don't think people stop on Talk ADHD and go, ooh, right, let's really get into this. They come to us because they've heard that we talk about stuff like this and tackle stuff that's a little bit less comfortable and a little bit less, you can just, have some lion's mane and everything will be fine.
Yeah. How about you, Liz? Do you think that's probably more of the reality of it, that it is the packaging?
Yeah, and I think there's an element of like, we all like drama, don't we? I think it's sort of human. I've seen this in sort of online therapist groups. The most popular posts that get the most responses, the most eyeballs, they're always the ones that are controversial in some way, or they're sort of saying something a little bit spicy, or perhaps even getting a lot of people going, oh, well, that's a bit unethical. So therapist use of social media in particular is quite interesting for that, because obviously we have to be quite careful about what we say online, and we shouldn't be speaking about clients. That's something I feel really strongly about, that even in a Facebook group that you think is private, somebody could take a screenshot and post that God knows where. So, people, I think there's an element of people often thinking it's a bit more private than it is as well. But I think the positive side of, you could say that we like drama, but we also like the personal. We like stories. That's how we're wired as human beings. I became a therapist because I like hearing people's stories, essentially, and helping them write new ones, which, of course, is a really important thing to do if you've grown up all your life thinking that you're just sort of a bit broken and wrong, and actually all along you were different, you're neurodivergent. You can write a new story
absolutely.
about that.
One last question on this, and then I'll move on. Do you think part of the reason there's so much, I don't know, debate's maybe too soft a word, but argument on social media is because what's been lost is the art of conversation? See, I say that because I've asked questions before of people that I thought were perfectly reasonable and been blocked. Right. See, that's not how I thought a conversation or a question worked. I thought you ask a question. If you are genuine, open, honest, you can give an answer. And then I interpret that, well, if you've blocked me, maybe my interpretation was right in the first place. Otherwise, you'd have said, actually, it's this. But the longer I see that and the more it goes on, I wonder if it's just that people have forgotten how to have conversations, and that actually social media is a pretty rubbish place to try and have one. Whether it's on X in 230 characters or on LinkedIn in long form or anywhere else, it just isn't conducive to actual conversation. And it goes back to that drama again. People seem to just want to snipe, argue, pick their sides rather than converse. Does that feel similar to both of you?
For me, what really stood out to me was Liz saying at the beginning there that she dialed back on the neurodivergent therapists because the market wasn't there. Because I think the market was there, but connecting to that was difficult. And we know at Divergence how difficult it is to connect to that market. But why did I say this? This is where having a conversation with ADHD isn't good, is it? I had a really strong point there, Matt, and I lost it.
All right, Liz, I'll bring you in and he'll remember. It's all right, ADHD podcast, we're supposed to do this. I think I know where you were going, but I'll let you think. Liz, how about you with the conversation piece?
Well, I guess what I would say to that is, yes, you're right. It doesn't feel like we're having conversations. We're definitely not having dialogue, but that's not what this tech is for. It's a one-way. It's not really a two-way facilitative technology. It's for people to put things out, but not really take things in.
That's interesting, but I think all three of us have had emotional reactions to stuff that people have put out. So we are taking in from the social media that is being put out. And it isn't a conversation, is it? It's that makes me angry. That makes I disagree with that person, and almost impotent that I can't do anything about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
As well, to the point that you just say, well, actually, I'm off.
No,
I have days where I just can't look at it because it's.
So on that then, Liz, you put that post. You decided not to do personal, just to do business. I suppose the $1 million question, which could be a lesson for us all, is: did it help doing that?
Yeah. It's given me time and it's given me headspace, actually. I've worked on other things. I've focused on spending more time with people who actually work with and help my business in real life. My excellent freelance trainers that I work with onboarded somebody else recently. And, we've looked at a new platform for online learning. There's lots and lots of things that we've done. And actually, it's quite exciting because there's going to be a platform for other therapists and other people, perhaps even like yourselves, to be able to do workshops through that and, you know, come and find people by actually doing what you do best, which is talking about the stuff you know, helping other people learn about this stuff in a way that's useful and facilitates dialogue, rather than just having these wars on these platforms where you can't really hear each other, you can't really see each other, you can't really see where each other is coming from. There's always so much you don't know about somebody. When you see a post on social media, you see what's there, but you don't see what's behind it. But what we really wanted to do, myself and H, who works with me as training coordinator and hopefully will join us as a co-director next year, we really wanted to create something that would facilitate actually having those conversations and having that dialogue. So that's what I've done. I've gone and found a way of trying to do that instead of focusing on trying to get heard above that noise. Let's go make noise somewhere else and give other people a way to make noise away from that space.
The positive effect as well. Okay, so as I sort of try and steer this towards wrapping it up, here is what I'd like to ask you, Liz, as a therapist, and then Andrew, I'll get your thoughts as well. In this conversation, I think we've all been very honest and candid that there are things that wind us up and there are things that we get angry about and have opinions about. The skill is for us ourselves to be grown up, for us ourselves to realise what's right and wrong for us, what's healthy and not healthy for us, and then to take action on it. This is a podcast, notably for neurodivergent people. And we've already said as much that it's fair to say we find that difficult. We find that self-regulation difficult. So, Liz, very quickly, what would you say, or what would you recommend as a very simple, whether it's a tool or a sort of a thought process that we could employ or try to practice employing, maybe when we're not so overstimulated, that could help us when that sort of smacks us around the face and we feel that discombobulated because we've seen something that makes us feel like the wimp in the playground and not the cool kid. From a therapy point of view, I mean.
For a simple question you can ask yourself, am I going to give a crap about this in a week's time or even tomorrow?
I love that.
You know, how long is this actually going to stay with me for? If I don't reply, what's that going to feel like if I scroll past it? So I know sometimes I kind of get this urge to sort of stick up for people, I guess. You know, if I see something that feels really ableist or wrong, just wrong, like misinformation, I guess, about neurodivergence or ADHD or autism. You know, there can be, you know, sometimes there is a justice or altruism driven sentiment, but at the same time, you can't challenge absolutely everything. And for every single post that peddles that stuff, there's going to be 50, 500 more even. So am I still going to be thinking about this time tomorrow? Will I still remember this in a week, in a month? And it actually might be that, you will, and you will feel, you know, it might stick with you and it might be the right thing to challenge it. It's giving yourself that space to think it through.
Yeah. So it's putting that makes sense. Andrew, anything you want to add from your view as a clinician on that one as well?
I don't know so much as a clinician, but as my experience of dealing with the media, I think that's really useful stuff that Liz has said. But having been someone that has upset other people, what I would suggest is that people bear in mind that what they're seeing is just the marketing front. It is the shop front, and you don't know what's in the back. You don't know what's in the shop because you're only sort of skimming past as you go down the high street, seeing shop front, and there is usually behind the headlines a story. And I think we see, you know, I've seen people who irritate me on social media be really upset by the kickback that they get for what they put in their shop front. And I think as a group of people who are all neurodivergent, surely we should be working to lift each other. In a society where we're struggling to get medication and get assessments, you know, we shouldn't be bickering amongst ourselves about X, Y, and Z. We should be saying, how do we lift this together, but in a safe way? And I think that's where the tension comes, but that's where the conversation comes in, Matt. And it's seen beyond that shop front.
Oh, maybe there's a future conversation of, right, well, how do we make that happen when so many people feel either attacked or picked on or defensive or whatever it may be? How do we actually get to a point where the conversation feels more for the common good and that everyone is pulling on the same rope in the same direction rather than on multiple strands in every different direction, which only serves to confuse anyone else that's trying to learn about it.
I guess
There's
this is
that.
why to get in a room, isn't it? We have to actually talk to each other, sometimes be able to say, well, what did you mean by that? What did you mean when you said that? And I think that's part of it. And also I think there's a recognition that people get spiky and defensive when they feel disempowered or left out of the conversation. So how can we bring in maybe people that we don't hear from so often, people that aren't getting to contribute and aren't really getting to share their experiences in this way? For example, co-production to shape what we do, because the people we do it for, not necessarily all about those of us who've got a platform, I suppose. I don't know what you think, Andrew. I might just be waffling here. Being very idealistic.
No, I think it's really important. I put a post out at the weekend. We're having this problem as a company. What do you people think is the solution to that? That conversation, I certainly got useful stuff as someone who owns a business from that, but it's about being able to hear what other people are saying. I don't have the answers for much, but together we can work something out. It's having the humility to say, yeah, my flashy advert isn't all that. This is what's important, and helping pull together, because the bickering it leaves a bad taste in my mouth most days, and some days I can't even look.
Right. I think that's a fairly succinct place to stop. Is Liz's advice on, as people, taking a breath, taking a beat, asking yourself some really obvious questions, I think is brilliant. And I will add it to my toolkit. And what you're saying as well, Andrew, is equally right. That sometimes the skill is in then saying, I just don't have enough for this. I'm just not going to engage. I'm not going to look. And that's the healthiest and the best thing to do. And to only come back and re-engage when. Liz, very briefly, how do people find Free to Be Me? What's the best place to go? I'm already going to contact somebody and say that's who you need to talk to, because I was a dullard and completely forgot that's what you do. But how do we get people to find you? And more importantly, how do we get people to find the therapists that are neurodivergent or that are really going to help them, or perhaps have been through your training?
So we have a website. So we're free to be me neurodiversity.com. The 2 is a number 2. And we do have a Find a Therapist directory. So all the therapists who did work directly for us when we were sort of providing therapy, they're all on that page. Everybody is neurodivergent. Everyone's been interviewed and, qualifications checked and everything like that. So we know that everyone who's doing therapy and coaching on there is absolutely the real deal, properly qualified to do what they do. And so there's other places that you can find neurodivergent therapists as well. Of course, can I remember any of them right now when I need to?
I only wanted to know yours, to be fair. It's fine. It's your time for your little advert on our behalf, so that's fine by me. So Free to Be Me, neurodiversity.com.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're an organisation or an individual wanting training in working with neurodiversity, working with ADHD or autism, or indeed ADHD, because we've got a course coming up on working with the combined diagnosis as well, combined neurotype, then please do come to the website, get in touch with us. Happy to chat about what we do, what we can offer.
Right. Fantastic. Folks, you heard it there first, and I'll put all the links, as ever, in all the show notes on all the platforms. And I will just say this, Liz, thank you. I set it down for 45 minutes. I've gone over, but I think every extra minute was completely justified, because this has been a brilliant conversation. And I'm so grateful for you for giving up your time and coming, hightailing it from the gym and from work to join us, because it's really useful. And Andrew, as ever, thank you for your input and your insights. And
Nice to be back.
It is, isn't it? We'll be back again, and I hope I haven't waffled on too long. So, folks, we'll see you again very soon for another episode of Talk ADHD. But until then, thank you very much for listening and watching. And please, please, please do press like, press subscribe, and tell other people, because it does help. And we'll speak to you soon.